Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another exciting episode of Excel. I know you're excited. All right, so this is session 1.2 on page 30, and we'll go through the overview that's in the book, and then we'll go through some of the lessons, and we'll talk about using formulas and functions, which is very exciting because formulas are the best way to actually make things happen in Excel. So let's start from the bottom left. Here you could see these grid lines, and the grid lines basically separate the cells, but they don't print. Now, you'll notice that when I click on the box, it highlights it, selects it. That's the box that I'm working in right now. These little boxes, by the way, are called cells. When I click on a cell, it will tell me which cell I'm in right up here, and we will also talk about ranges in just a second. We talked about in the last video, in order to make a formula, we have to start it with the equal sign. So let's say I want to figure out how old I am. So let's type in, whoops, age. And let's say for argument's sake, I'm 29. Okay. And there are 365, whoops, let's do it like this. There's 365 days in a year. And I want to multiply one by the other, right? And that would give me how old I am when I turn 29. So I'm going to type in equals, grab the 29, or type in B4 times days. Okay, so you'll see in the formula box it says equals B4 times B5, and when I hit enter, it will give us the answer. Now, the really cool thing about this, and I get the answer, 10,585 days. The really cool thing is that because I didn't do 29 times 365, but instead I used a formula, I could change these variables and then things will change. So for example, how old will I be when I turn 35? Right? And it will automatically give me those numbers. So theoretically, I could change this number and always be able to calculate what this is based on these two variables. Okay, but you'll note that there's that equal sign multiplying them together. And we'll look at some more fancy examples of that in a second. Up here we have the font and the size, which I could play around with. And these are the similar formatting tools that you have in other programs, like coloring and so on, right? To make things stand out. Let's take a look at page layout. We could change the margins of the page, the size, define the page breaks. This is very important when we're printing because it could be very difficult to make this sheet fit properly onto a normal piece of paper. Next, let's take a look at a different example, and that is AutoSum. Okay, so let's start with a new sheet, and you'll notice up in the corner, I have this button here called AutoSum. And basically what that does is it automatically adds things together. So let's come up with another example. Okay, so I have a list of eggs. And this is important because I need to know how many eggs to make my friends for breakfast. Bob, Sue, Jane, and Mary are coming over, and each of them requires a different number of eggs in their omelet. Okay, so I could add the numbers together, or I could just press where it says AutoSum, and AutoSum figures out where my numbers are in the series. Okay, so it realizes that because I'm running AutoSum here, I actually want to add these together. And let's take a look for a second at the formula. I put in equals, telling Excel that I'm starting a formula, and I put in sum, which means add those together, and then in the bracket I put a range. I give the first number, which is B2, that's up here, where Bob is, and the last number, B6. So I'm telling it, go from B2 to B6 and include everything in between. And once I have those numbers, what should I do with it? Add them all together using sum. So I'm going to hit enter, and it gives me 12. So I know that I need 12 eggs in total for all these people together, and that was automatically added. Now, I could do the same thing by clicking equals this cell plus this cell plus this cell plus this cell, right? That works too. Will also give me 12, but this is a lot more efficient because I'm using a range. It gives me a lot less numbers. And again, I'm showing you an example with 4 numbers. We could have 2 million numbers, and this would all add them up all automatically. Right? Now, let's say we said, well, we have 12 eggs for breakfast, but how many eggs are we going to need for a week? How many eggs are we going to need for a month, right? So we could do some quick calculations like that. We could do week, we could do month, and let's do equals B7 times 7. So I could mix using numbers and cells together, right? So the 7 is not going to change, but the B7 could if I change the top numbers. Okay, so I need 84, and let's just do 30. So I'll do 12 times 30. Okay, so I need 360 eggs a month. But suddenly Bob tells me, wait 1 second, I want more eggs. I'm actually a 3-egg-a-day person now. Okay, so then the total eggs that I need per day changes, as well as the week and the month. Okay, and I could also delete, right-click, and delete the row to move it up, and now I have my box, right? We're going to use this kind of technique in many other places because it's really helpful to create these variables that I could then take and graph, right? We're going to learn more about graphs later, but I could put in a chart, and this will give me a quick chart about how many eggs I need every day, every week, and every month, because as you know, my friends love eggs. Okay, let's keep on going. This is handy. It's called the page break preview down here at the bottom. And when I click it, it shows me what it's going to look like when I print it, where the page break is going to be. Right now, not so relevant because I don't have that much information. And you can see it right here. You see that dotted line? That tells me where it's going to print, and here too. So I could move those around in order to ensure that when I'm printing it, and this is what it's going to look like when it prints, I'm able to fit everything onto the same page. Or maybe sometimes I want to print the page landscape sideways instead of portrait view, like up and down. And this goes back to normal mode here at the bottom. Okay, so let's get started. We looked at some of the math already that we can use, and we'll just run through a few examples in figure 1-22 on page 32. So let's first add a couple numbers together. So as we talked about, I could do equals this number plus this number, or just to make things even simpler, I could add numbers together. So I could say equals 1 plus 2, hit enter, and I get 3. Okay, we could do the same thing with subtraction, equals 8 minus 2, hit enter, and I get 6. Multiplication uses the star, so I could do 8 times 12. I have division equals, let's say, 7 divided by 2, and I'll get a fraction. And we could also do exponents, so I'll take equals, and in this case we'll just grab this cell, B2, and then we add to the power of 4, and that will give us a number. Okay, so we're also able to use variables, we're also able to use numbers when we're doing these kind of calculations. You should be aware of the order of operations on figure 1-23 on page 33, because depending on what you're doing in the formula, you may need to order which calculations are going to be done first, because that may impact your end result. Okay, so you can see I've added a new column, and this one is juice. So we know how many eggs my friends want to have, and this is how many cups of juice they need. Right? Mary drinks a lot of juice. Now, if you look at cell B7, so B7 up here, it says equals sum, add the numbers together between B2 and B6. And I want that exact same thing to happen here between D2 and D5, let's say, right? Because D6 is actually blank. So I could use auto sum like we used before, or I could copy the formula. So I'm going to press Control-C, or right-click and copy. And you'll notice that when I do, it turns green. I'll go down to D7 and press paste. And now I get 11. I press escape to get out of the selection. And if we look at 11, the formula changed. Here it's B2 to B6, but here it's now D2 to D6, right? So it copied itself and it changed what was in the formula. Okay, because it realizes it's in a new spot. So it's basically capturing this same box here and sticking that same box there. We're going to talk about ways to change it with absolute cell values a little later on in the course. But for now, that's the basic idea. Okay, we could do the same thing here. Copy this and paste it there. But it adjusts the number based on now the new column, which is our juices. Okay, so now we're on page 36, and let's escape out of this, and we'll look at two very important things that you have to know. Okay, number one is we're going to talk about syntax. Okay, that's in the middle of the page on page 36. So what that means is, if I want to, I'll just grab a new group of numbers, and we'll stick them over here. Okay, and I guess because we have a breakfast theme, we'll call this one bacon. Okay, so if I want to add numbers together, I type in equals, and as you know, what does equals do? It tells Excel I'm ready to enter a formula. I'm going to type in sum. Okay? As soon as I do, as soon as I put in sum bracket, you'll notice that this little tooltip shows up. And that tells me what the format, what the syntax of this function or argument has to be. Okay? So the function is sum. That's basically what I want Excel to do. And the argument is where I want it to do or how I want it to do it. Okay, so what's it telling me? After you write sum, in the first bracket, put in the first number, which could be a real number like 7, or it could be a range, right? So, or a cell or whatever you want. So we're going to put in F2. Now you'll notice that after it says number 1, down here, it has a comma. So I'm going to press comma, and as soon as I do that, it highlights number 2 because it says where's the next number, right? So in this case, because we, let's say, want to add those two together, it's just going to add those two numbers together. But as we talked about before, to make this work, we actually only need to have one argument, and that is F2, and we start a range with a colon, down to F5. You'll notice that it's stuck on the closing bracket automatically. So now what I'm telling Excel to do is go to F2, and then F5 and everything in between. Okay, once I hit enter, it will add all those up, just like we have in the other column. Okay, but this is sum adding together. We could also look at a bunch of other things using AutoSum, like average, count numbers, max, and min. And we're going to go through each one of those because they're very important, and we literally use them all the time. Now, I'll tell you a cool trick. Right now, when I highlight these numbers, before I even go into anything else, you'll notice at the bottom that the average of these numbers is 275, the count is 4, and the sum is 11. So you should keep an eye on these because these are always popping up as you're working on your numbers and gives you an instant snapshot of what's going on. Okay, but let's take a look at some of those functions right now. So the first that we'll do is, well, we did sum already. Next we'll do average. Okay, so we want to find out what the average is, what the middle is between the average number of eggs that we're going to need. So I'll just press equals average. And it's going to tell me, okay, just like before, we have to put in numbers. I'm just going to click and drag to make that box with the range, hit enter, and it's going to tell me on average, I need 3.25 eggs. This is the average for each day between those people, okay? And again, we can copy and paste it. And then it will give me numbers based on the juice category, okay? Next, we'll look at count. Okay, count is super simple. Basically, all count does is counts the numbers of cell in a range. Okay, so I'm going to pick these 4 right here, and we could call this count how many people are showing up for breakfast, right? How many numbers are in that list? And it tells me there's 4. Okay, because this has 4 numbers in it. 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't mean anything else. It just counts the number of cells with something in it, and it just gets back to us with that. Okay. Next, we have max and min. Okay, so max means what is the biggest number in this range, and you can just look at it and guess that it's 5, right? And min tells us what is the smallest number in that range. But let's say we were making an Excel sheet to track ages, and we want to find out the youngest or oldest, or the scores, the highest and lowest. We'd be able to easily do that by using max and min and average to find the top, the bottom, and the middle. Okay, so here for min, we have one person ordered 1 juice. That's the lowest number. The highest number was a 5. And the average was 2.75 for juices, but 3.25 for eggs. And we could obviously do the same thing for bacon. Okay, now we could replicate all of those by using AutoSum as well. So let's copy over some of these numbers. Okay, now again, I'm copying the, whoop, what am I doing? That wasn't right. Control copy, control paste, control paste. There we go. That's better. Okay, so now let's look at putting in AutoSum some of these numbers. We might actually have a problem. So first we'll do average. I'll click on average. Is that what we want to average? Actually, it's not. We don't want to average these numbers. We want to average these numbers. So in this case, AutoSum would not work because it's guessing the wrong range. But what I can do is grab this and just change it to these. Okay, so before it was picking F7 to F9, but instead we're going to change it to F2 to F5, or F6, depending if you want the empty space. I hit enter, it gives me 2.75. And the same thing will be true with all the rest of them. So if I want to put in average, count numbers, etc., so it's trying to guess which cells I'm interested in analyzing, but it's actually these. I hit enter, it will give me that number. Okay, so if you have any questions about how this works, send me a question. I think it takes a little bit of practice to get used to, but once you do, it will help you do a lot of different things, right? So let's look at the actual example on page 37 from the textbook, and we'll do it for our purposes, okay? So let's make this really simple. We'll do it with HST, okay? And we will do total. Okay, this is a very common thing, like you see subtotal, tax, total, right? We'll do something like that. Okay, so let's say that here on the side, let's make up a couple costs. So we'll say eggs cost $1, and juice costs $1.25, and bacon costs 63 cents. Okay, these are going to be our variables that we're going to use, and the way we're setting it up like this is because we can always change these numbers in order to reflect changing prices. Now bacon is worth 73 cents, and then it will change all our calculations. Okay, so the first thing, and we'll just make our little variable box here. In fact, I'll move this down a couple. Okay, we'll call this price list because we're being fancy. I'll add these together with margin center, and I'll put them in a fancy box. Okay, and then that way all our customers know our price list. Okay, so let's figure out what our costs are going to be for breakfast. So let's take a look. Okay, interesting. So right now, cost combines these three things together. Okay, so let's figure out how we do that. We could do it by a bunch of different variables. Like for example, we could calculate how much the prices in these columns and then add them all together. Or we could do it all in one step. So let's first do it the first way. Okay, so I'll put eggs, and I'll type in equals 3 times 1, hit enter. Okay, if we drag down, it will copy the formula. It did not work. Okay, because it's instead of copying this and then copying the next one, it's moving down here as well. And we're going to learn about absolute cell references a little later. So not to confuse you, we'll keep on going. Okay, so I'll just do, equals 5 times 1 equals 3 times 1 and equals B5 times 1. Hit enter. All right, so all these numbers are in, we'll just make it dollars so we remember. Okay, so all these numbers are in dollars, and basically we have 3 eggs. If we change the price of eggs, it will update all the prices. Okay, now to get our total cost, we would basically go equals this number plus this that number plus this number, hit enter, and then we take equals this number times 1.13, and then we would put the total, which is this. Sorry, that didn't make sense. Minus that. There we go. And then this is equals this plus. Okay, so there you go. I'm going to give you this sheet so you're not totally lost. You could follow along and play around with it. But that is basically the idea. That's how you would put in tax, and because it's all set up with variables, we're able to adjust the prices, and it's going to reflect over here. Now, as I said before, the other option for doing this would be to add everything together in the cost box, so we could try that as well. So we could do equals, and the first thing we want to do is put in a bracket, okay, and then do 5 times this plus another bracket 1 times that plus another bracket 1 times. Okay, I have no idea if this is going to work, but if it does, I'll hit enter. There we go. That's the total cost of Sue's breakfast. Okay, so let's take a look at what that did. Okay, so when I click on it, it will highlight everything. And because I'm using the order of operations like we learned about before, I do equals, telling Excel I want to open a formula, but I put them in brackets because I want to keep them all separate. I don't want to multiply them all together because I want to I want to add them all together, but I want to multiply them first. So in the end, I only have 3 numbers being added together, just like we did over here in multiple steps. So the first one is B3 times M3. So I take the price of eggs and I take the number of eggs and I times it by the price of eggs. Then I do the second step, D3 times M4. That's the purple times the green. Last, I take the pink, times it by the orange, I hit enter, and that will give me everything, right? Then I would be able to do the same calculation that I did here, and the same one here, and that would give me the total. And then, of course, if I want to find out what the total is for breakfast, I would put in equals sum, or I could just add them together, grab our 4 people, and hit enter. And it's going to tell me that so far, the breakfast cost is $11.37. I could figure out what the average person is paying, and I could do that by typing in equals average and then grabbing this cell, J6. I could find out who's paying the least and who's paying the most by using min and max. And again, keep in mind, it's easy to judge it by eye when you have 4 or 5 people coming for breakfast, but if you have 3,000, it's going to be a lot more difficult. That's why these tools are so useful. Okay, we'll just add a few more things. Let's take a look. So we're going to zip over to page 42, and this is to add somebody coming for breakfast. As you'll note, I have a problem now because if I go in here and add another person, it will break up our price list. Okay, so what I'm going to do is grab the price list and I'm going to move it down here. But I could also use another sheet like we're going to talk about later, which would make that useful too. But now, because everything on each list is not moved down, I'm able to just go in and right click and go insert row, and this will be Bob 2, and then I could just put in his numbers as well, and you'll notice that as I do, everything will update because it accommodates those ranges. Now it goes from F2 to F7, so it added that in automatically. Okay, and everything else will update as it goes along. These are still good because it changed all the formulas to reflect that I copied them here. Okay, so now it's going to go, sorry, it was this one that we're looking at. Okay, so now it's going to go and remember that they're down here instead of being back up here. Okay, let's keep on going. So we talked about that. Adding a row works the same way. I just right click and press insert, and that would let me add additional menu items and so on. Okay, just a quick note about formatting, like you could see on page 53. Right now you'll see this thicker dotted line here. That's the page break. So if I printed this, it would put my totals on the next page. To make them all work on the same page, I would go into page layout on the ribbon bar and change this to one page and change this to one page. Okay, now if I take a look at print preview, you'll notice that everything shows up on the same page. Okay, so that would be an easy way to show my figures if I'm handing in a printed piece of paper. Okay, so this is a very important point on page 55, and this is a cool thing that most people don't know, so I would recommend this one. Normally, we're interested when we look at this at the final numbers, because here we're trying to calculate the cost of breakfast. But it's possible to show all the formulas to make sure they're right. And when you're doing your homework and you're not sure if you have the right formula in the right box, this could be incredibly helpful. So to get to that, let's take a look. You press Control plus and tilde, that little thing on top of the tab, and it shows you all the formulas that are in the boxes. Okay, because this way, if there's a mistake, you could spot it here really quickly. And I'll just press Control plus tilde again. It almost worked. And go back the other way. Okay, and the other way to do this is by going to the Formulas tab and then clicking this button where it says Show Formulas. You could turn them on and off there. Okay, so that can be really helpful to go in and see what formulas are running behind the numbers that you're generating at the end. So that wraps it up for this module. If there are any questions, please let me know. And next, we're going to go into Module 2, formatting a workbook. For this module, take a look at the assignments and the quiz that's posted in Moodle, and have a great day.